everybody, welcome back to the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. I am so thrilled that you're with us today. Twice a week, every week for the last 5 years, we've been bringing you this show to help you be that lawyer, confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. So buckle up. That's what you're in for a ride today. I've got my friend Gideon here, Provisor's favorite. How you doing, Gideon?
I am doing awesome and delighted to be here.
Yeah. This was a long time in the making, a long time in the coming. We got together at the Provisors Group Leader Summit, and we kind of were like sitting at the table, and we're like, why haven't we met before? Why haven't we collaborated? And this was like our first thing that we said we had to do. So, absolutely thrilled you're here.
Absolutely. I've been a fan for a long time and heard about you and get your newsletter. And for those of you listening, I highly recommend the newsletter if I can start off the bat with that.
All right.
And
I don't
so
really.
delighted that we got assigned to the same table.
Yeah, that was fortuitous, and thrilled as well. And yeah, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, I think there you could just email me at steve@fretzin.com and I'll shoot that off to you. But what's the article that I put in above the law? What are the podcasts for the week? That kind of stuff, and just making sure you guys are properly informed and educated on what we're teaching lawyers these days. So let's start off with our quote of the show, and it's apropos for what we're going to cover today. The quote is, if no one is complaining about your fees, you are almost certainly not charging enough. And who's the famous person that came up with that? I think his
That
name
sounds
is,
suspicious like me. I've been
yes. All
saying
right. So
that to
Gideon Grunfeld.
clients and to people I know for 20 years.
Yeah. And I love that quote. And it is so on the money. But welcome to the show. And please give us some explanation of why that is your quote of the show.
That is my quote of the show because I have lived this and in every way imaginable. So I lived this when I was a lawyer and I was a large firm litigator, and there was always a question about hourly rates. And it occurred to me one time when I was a junior kind of baby lawyer, listening to more senior lawyers talk about this, that they were all worried about the reaction of the client or the potential client. And it occurred to me, I have a business background, I have a business degree, and I was like, that's just odd. At some point, you have to test the market. And so it occurred to me, just a thought popped in my head. It really was like one of those thought bubbles. And it was, if no one's complaining about your rates, you're almost certainly not charging enough.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And, obviously we're both in the business development space too, which means we're asking our clients, what are you charging an hour? And are you closing every deal? Like, oh yeah, I close every 10 out of 10. Well, if you're closing 10 out of 10 on estate planning or some of these other things, and yeah, maybe you might be a little bit low. And then we realize, wow, they're way low. And so it's not like you have to send out an email and say, hey, everybody, I know I'm 400 an hour, but now I'm 600 an hour, right? We don't have to do that. But, we also could start right with like the new people we sign up that don't know what our rates are. Like that seems like low hanging fruit, right?
100%. And that is, in fact, when people ask me the question, what's the easiest way to start? It is to start with a subset of potential new clients. And so when you get someone who's essentially brand new to you, you don't have an issue that they come from a trusted referral source, and part of the relationship is you want to keep the referral source happy, or it's your cousin, or
Mm,
if you have any ties like that, that's not ideal. But if you get someone really new to you, they have minimal connections to you, they come through your website or someone you don't know well, don't fall for the fallacy, which happens in gambling. See, in gambling, you go to the casino, if you go to the roulette table, they show you the prior results of the table. The table does not know that. The only people who know that are bad people who are bad statistics. And same thing is true for this, meaning you might know that the last time you quoted this rate, you're at 425 an hour, but no one else knows. And so feel free to go quote an appropriate rate and don't be a prisoner to your past.
yeah, I love it. I love it. So you guys are hearing Gideon Grunfeld, president of Rainmaking for Lawyers. By the way, that name, it's a lot like how to manage a law firm. Like you put in the term that someone would put into Google. And I don't know if you thought of that at the time, but that's like kind of my thought is like, wow, that's such a better name than Fretzin or Be That Lawyer. No one's typing that into Google unless they want to find me. But describing what you do is, I think, a great name for a company nowadays.
It is. I mean, although I have to say, Rainmaking for Lawyers is a lot to spell in a URL, and Fretzin is unique because
No?
I don't know, you probably know this better than I do. What else in the world is called Fretzin? So if someone, at the beginning, no one knows your name, but after a while, you're the only thing on the planet that you're certainly the only thing in this space, in the professional services space, consulting, advising space. So
Yeah.
you own that name. And
Wow.
so
That's true.
I
That's
love
true.
I love the name of that business. Now, the
Well,
thing is, Grunfeld is not Fretzin. Fretzin is way easier to pronounce and spell and remember. So I
okay.
think you went
Well,
the right way with that one.
all right. I'm onto something. Yeah. And just so everyone knows, Fretzin is a unique name. There's about 25 of us in the country, in the
Yeah.
world, and they're all my family. So this was a name changed at Ellis Island years ago through a grandfather and all that jazz. But I don't know. That's I was talking to how to manage the law firm guy, and that's exactly it. Like put in the actual search of what someone would type into Google anyway. But give us a little bit of background because I think it's important to set up the conversation we're going to have for people to know kind of where you came from.
Yeah, happy to do it. So I am a fourth generation lawyer. So I am currently in inactive status technically, but I was a lawyer. My mom's a lawyer. My grandfather was a lawyer on four continents. I joke sometimes it's almost a genetic defect. This is something I really grew up with around the table. My extended family would form a small bar association. So this is the world I came in. And I was a lawyer, and before that, I was a consultant. I was an HR executive before I went to college. After out of college, I worked for a consulting firm based in LA now, but worked back east, and so worked for large law firms for 10 years. I was a litigator. I just did antitrust law. I had a side practice, a pro bono practice representing charter schools. And then I decided I wanted to do something truly entrepreneurial and started my own consulting business a little bit more than 20 years ago. And since then, we've really been working on business development and more recently, a lot of just institutional issues, succession planning, strategic planning, mergers, acquisitions, all of those kinds of things, compensation. And one of the things that happens all the time is we end up talking about fees. It's one of the most I think you find this too. If you want to help someone in our world, in our space, helping them raise their fees and collect their fees is the fastest
Yeah.
deliverable we provide. And that's why I absolutely love talking about it.
Yeah, you can go out and build, get 10, 20, 30% more business, or you could just tell everyone, hey, pay me $50 more an hour or whatever it is that you
Right.
got to do. And it jumps it up. But, you know, I think there's a reason why lawyers are notoriously scared and bad at raising rates. And I would love to hear your take on that.
I think for two reasons. One is that they don't have good examples. And so even the most diligent person, if they're really modeling it, a lot of times what they do is this is what I saw the person down the hall. This is what I saw early in my career. This is I call a buddy or two. I go to the trade association and I ask what they do. And most lawyers don't have a strategy. So what happens is you replicate sort of suboptimal ways of doing it. And then I think there's a subtle, more even stronger point. The biggest obstacle is psychological, is that, and it goes to the quote that you started with, which is that subconsciously people think that the goal of negotiating about fees is to avoid the conversation. And so
Yeah.
the more you minimize objections, you win. And it's a little bit like the example you cited. It would be like the real estate agent or broker says, I can sell your property in 48 hours. And I'm sure they can if they lower the price low enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If they really sell you down the river on the price, they will sell it. And so I think there's this unspoken sense among lawyers that I should be avoiding this conversation. And I think partly because they don't have a strategy, the whole thing makes them uncomfortable. And so they just avoid it. And that's where a lot of lawyers are where they are.
Yeah, I have a quick story. My late great Larry, the lawyer father, don't have a long lineage of lawyers like you do, but I did have one, and he was the best. And he was retired from law. He was walking down LaSalle Street in Chicago with where all the lawyers hang out, and a client approached him, past client, and said, Larry, are you practicing again? He goes, no, I'm retired. I'm just down here for an arbitration. I'm helping out. And she goes, oh my God, you were the best lawyer I ever had. I've never seen your like since. And God, were you cheap. So I think that story just had to be told for this episode because I know my father was an amazing lawyer. He was the smartest guy in any room he'd walk into, but I don't think he had the business acumen. And also, there's another twist to it, which is he grew up in the project. So I think he and money had a very odd relationship. And that might be something else that other people are dealing with is their relationship to money and their value. And pricing. So maybe that's something we can get into a little bit too.
100%. I think that part of what in my mission in life is, given the background I have, is that I see that lawyers devalue themselves all the time. They
Yeah.
do it in their conversations with potential clients, sort of in the public and large. Sometimes people don't realize what a blessing it is to be one of the few professions that people tell jokes about. That means that you've hit a certain status that you can tell a joke to millions of people, and lawyers are part of the joke. So enjoy the status. We've earned it. We do a terrible job as lawyers in the legal community explaining some of what we do and how miraculous it is. I've had conversations with people, and you don't hear this in plumbing supply company, that said, imagine that in your field, for example, some significant portion of your annual membership dues went to paying for victims of other bad lawyers. And that's literally when you pay your, especially in California and states like that, half of your legal fee, your membership dues, go to pay people harmed by other lawyers. And
Wow.
lawyers do a terrible job of explaining that, and a lot of what we do is they go, my I just give you documents. I give you this document and that document, and this, as if people wake up in the morning thinking they need a document as opposed to what the document does. And the
Hmm.
document does miraculous things, and that's one of the reasons why we're having all these pressures on price, is because lawyers don't give the clients or the world enough information so that they do anything other than choose the lowest price product. So I
Yeah.
think it's a lot on us. And I agree with you. Some of it is lawyers have an uneasy relationship to money, and it shows up in they think, oh, my hourly rate is 100 times the minimum wage, and that has to be, and they kind of get squeamish about it.
Yeah. It's like, hey, I just made $1,000 an hour. And for someone to say that or someone to hear that, it just sounds wrong or it sounds weird. But there are athletes and actors and executives, right, that are making, $1,000 a minute, $1,000 every 10 seconds, right? So it's like, it's all based on what they're serving, like what value they're bringing to the table, and how is it impacting the people around them, their company, building a big corporation, winning a Super Bowl, or helping you win a trial. I mean, they all have great value. It's just a matter of you may not necessarily feel what maybe other people are perceiving.
100%. And you see that both in uh, like with things that lawyers perceive as routine, and they've somehow convinced the people that's routine. Take estate planning. Estate planning, think about the risks associated. You draft a document, you hold on to it for 40 years, potentially, maybe longer. You have the liability for that much. You're having to keep up with tax changes and legal changes. And you imagine what the client would pay if they had to do this themselves.
Yeah.
Think of the incredibly complicated issues, financial, emotional, status, end of life, religion, faith, and lawyers just say, oh, here's a document, we'll charge you $3,500 for it, without explaining just how unbelievable this document is. It's literally the products of decades of experience and trial and error and mistakes that other people have made. And they just make it seem like, oh, we just print the document and we replace your name with the last net client's name. And they make it seem like a commodity because they don't always themselves appreciate not only like how powerful the document it is and how amazing it is, they don't at all think about the liability that comes if they screw up. And that's people don't charge for that, and that's just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, another angle to this too, Gideon, is maybe the way that a lawyer is approaching the sales process. Because if I'm providing an estate plan, you're providing me money, and that's an exchange, a product, right? A product or service for money. And if the sales process is done well, where the questions are being asked, and what would happen if this happened, or what would happen if that happened, and who would fight over this if you didn't have this in place, it'd be a free for all between my mother-in-law and my sister, sumo wrestling for to get my son and our money or whatever. Like there's all these emotional parts to all different kinds of law, and I don't think people that go in with a pitch realize how much they're giving up from a standpoint of the emotional connection, the empathy, and the value that can be perceived when a sales process is done properly. So maybe talk through that a moment as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think lawyers underestimate and undervalue that tremendously, and I think they do it in a couple of ways. So in terms of the sales process, I agree with you 100%, which is if you look at the sales process as a transaction, like I'm selling you a widget and you're going to sell, and then we're never going to see each other again, which is a ridiculous paradigm for legal services. Legal services are the opposite, meaning I'm probably going to help you with something, either one of the most difficult parts of your life, or at a minimum, something that's emotionally impactful. And the cost of getting it wrong in financial terms and emotional terms and nuisance and annoyance is off the charts high. We'll use estate planning. If you said to them, what is the cost of, at the end of your life, not having your wishes based on your faith or your values be carried out? Incalculable. What's
Mm.
the cost if your crazy Aunt Sally, everybody has some crazy aunt or uncle, you're like, they get control of your finances or your business or the family heirlooms. What's the cost of that? Incalculable. And so rather than pitching it as, I am your guide, we're going to embark on a journey together, and my job is to keep you out of trouble. Ultimately, you make the decisions, but we're on a journey together, and I have decades of experience that's based on hundreds of years of complicated stuff that I'm going to simplify for you. If you approach it that way, first of all, then you're not chasing people.
Hmm.
Because when you're looking at yourself as the guide, then the people who want to be there on that path will you'll attract them, and you'll also deter the people you should be deterring. And otherwise, it's just like every sale I make is something I just need to sell more and more stuff to people, and that tends to devalue you. And then you get clients that in the back of your head you're going, "Ooh, I knew from the beginning that wasn't the right person or that
Yeah.
wasn't the right organization."
Yeah. So there's a lot of intricacies about value and fees, but I think I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the common mistakes that lawyers make when they attempt or actually do increase their rates.
So yeah, so I would say that there are a couple. So there's both when they increase their rates, they do it either indiscriminately or without a strategy. So they don't choose the right people. And we talked a little bit about much easier to choose to raise your rates with new clients. The psychology of increasing rates on existing clients is there, and I've helped countless people do it, but it's much more complicated because they have a baseline of what you charge. And if you say to them, remember 400, now it's going to be 750 an
Yeah.
hour,
Yeah.
it's you're going to have a good explanation as to why and a very good emotional hook as to, but for a new client, start with them. And I would say that the biggest mistake that people make is that they are prisoners of the past and they are like, they're almost chained to whatever that number was. The new number has to be 5% or 8% or 10% of that number rather than look at what's the value to the client, what am I providing? Um, or another thing that's really powerful, if someone said to, I say to clients all the time, imagine you wanted to charge this, or you wanted to make your initial retainer Y. How would you have to tweak your services to for you to feel comfortable that that's worth it? Because people
Yeah.
look at the rate as like some immutable thing, and it's not. You want to charge that much, then provide the value that's going to make that people happy to pay your rate. And usually don't have to change that much. So the first thing is this mindset of then there's also the execution of how you decide what the rate is and how you communicate it. So we can talk about those in different segments if you want, but those are the three major mistakes. It's the mindset, it's deciding what the rate should be, and it's deciding how to communicate it.
And is it in part understanding or doing research on what currently the market will bear? So if I'm charging 400 an hour and the people that have the same level of experience at me and similar maybe size firms or whatever are charging 600 an hour, obviously I'm undervaluing myself compared to the market. So is that part of the process, or is that what most lawyers will never do?
I would say yes to both answers. So it's a small part of the process, but here's what I recommend that most people do. Don't worry about what the market is, and I'll tell you
Okay.
why. Um, I have almost never met in 20 years of doing this, as a consultant in the 10 years I was a lawyer, I've almost never met a lawyer who is extravagantly just, they go crazy on the rates.
Yeah.
They're almost always too conservative. They're almost always too inhibited. They're almost too conservative, right? So don't worry too much about what you think the market will bear. And the reason is what most lawyers end up doing is they end up skewing that analysis to sort of depress the rate. What I suggest that people do is use something a lot easier. So if you're charging by the hour, use something that I refer to as psychological breakpoints, which is just go to the next number in your market that actually has some psychological significance. And I came up with this actually. There was someone I worked with years ago who charged 260 an hour. And I kind of blurted out, I said, nothing costs 260. And it's true. Nothing costs $2.60. Nothing costs $260 an hour. And the reason is anybody who will pay 250, 260, 265, 270, there's some numbers that just don't have any psychological pull to them. There's a reason car companies charge you 49,995 because they know $50,000 actually is a barrier, has some psychological impact. So I just say, look at the psychological barriers above you. Don't do market analysis at first, and just be right below the next psychological barrier. So if you're at 410 or some weird number, and you're thinking 450 or 500 is the next psychological barrier, and you have this new potential client, just quote them 495. You'll thank me.
Yeah.
Part of this is to exercise your muscle of feeling a little bit uncomfortable.
Well, and here's the backup, and I'm not saying this should be done, but you say 490 and you do get pushback. Well, A, you learn something, and B, you still have the ability to say, cut it, not, I don't want anybody cutting rates, but like you can cut back and say, well, look, I mean, if it matters that much to you, we could do 475. I mean, that's still above where you were, and they feel like they're getting a deal, and you're still, 25 or $50 above where you were.
100%. And that goes to the how to communicate it. So
Mm,
assuming that, so let me just say one thing about how to decide. So one of the things that people make like I think a big mistake on is they look at their practice as a uniform practice and every client has to be charged the same way, rather than looking at it as a portfolio you're managing and you want a little diversity in your portfolio. You might be charging almost all hourly rates, but have a flat fee. You might have only flat fee and hourly rate, have an occasional contingency. That's the thing that gives you a chance to hit a home run and reduces the overall risk of your portfolio. So that's a whole other, I do a whole seminar about it, but that's part of to think about it that way. You don't have to have uniform pricing. People board planes all the time, and if you ask the person next to you how much they paid for their seat, it could be a widely different number than you. You don't get off the plane.
right.
And some lawyers have this, they're prisoners of like, I have to do the same thing for every client because someone will know. I don't know who that someone is, but that's a fallacy.
It's he's out there, she's out there.
She's out there somewhere. And
Yeah.
so the other thing is that people just don't understand. So if you're deciding how to charge between a flat fee and an hourly rate, the quintessential question they ask yourself is how is value? Is value a proxy of the time? Is time a value the proxy of what I provide? So let me give you an example. If you are in pre-litigation and someone comes to you and says, hey, and you understand, you say, I'm going to write a letter to opposing counsel. I'm going to write a letter to the CEO of the company you're dealing with, and I'm going to put it on my letterhead, and I'm going to make this go away from you. The value you're providing has very little to do with the time you're putting in. In fact, if you can make it go away really fast, the client values it even more. So do not charge by the hour. I've seen people perform miracles. They literally get on the phone for 15 minutes. They write one letter. They make a $250,000 case go away, where that check that the other side wasn't sending you suddenly appears, or you get 80% of it, and then they'll bill their client for 0.75 hours. And I go bonkers. I'm like, what? The value you provided had nothing to do with your time. So then charge flat fee, charge a percentage. That's a key question. Now, there are things where your time is a good proxy in discovery, in litigation, in negotiation. There's certain things where time is, but don't reflexively think you only can charge in one way. With the exception of things like divorce, where you're limited by the rules of certain, you can't charge a contingency if you're for divorce. Lawyers dramatically underutilize their options, and they're totally sort of unaware of, hey, should I be charging by the hour or not?
Well, not only that, but this also plays into a little bit of delegation down and AI and things that are going to make things more efficient. Charging a flat fee is sort of going to make a lot more sense than hourly, maybe in the future more than today.
100%. I think
Yeah.
we're already seeing, I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago, so this would have been in October, November 2024, not to make this a non-evergreen topic, although it's an evergreen topic. Um, the there are now public comments about AI being used to create very good drafts of patent infringement complaints and lawsuits, among the most complex. And they were sending them to patent lawyers and saying, this is pretty good. This is not as good as what I would write. This isn't what I final product would be. We're absolutely going to a world where you'll be able to create a rough draft in minutes, hours, and it will make no sense to do that on an hourly basis. The value you provide is all in your ability to take something that's rough and polish it and use your decades of experience or even 3 years of experience because you know what is important. You also know what's not in the document that should be in the document. That's
Yeah.
the hardest thing for AI to know. And time is not going to be the proxy for your value, but your value is still going to be unbelievably high because of your knowledge base and your expertise.
Yeah. So we've talked about hourly, we've talked about flat fee. A number of lawyers are also moving to a subscription model. Do you work with folks on that?
I do. And so I think subscription models work really well when you have high volume, repetitive. The subscription works. So, for instance, I worked in antitrust law, and antitrust law would not work on a subscription model because unless you're, Microsoft, no one has that much repeat antitrust work.
Yeah.
But let me give you lots of examples. If you are a management side employment lawyer and you are doing employee handbooks, you're giving advice and counsel, and employment law throughout the country is getting incredibly complex, and minimum wage laws and all of this stuff, then that's a model that you can space out the payment because you'll know that some months they won't need you at all, and some months they'll need you a lot. And a subscription model is a great way to also get the client to open up and use you a lot at the beginning, where if you charge them $500 an hour, they might be reluctant to really engage with you initially.
Yeah.
The subscription model there gets them engaged. You get to solve their problems. You get to prevent some problems. They get comfortable with you. And then when the time comes, some big thing might happen, and you go, okay, for this, we might need to do it outside, especially litigation outside the subscription. But people who are doing high volume, repetitive issues, family law, there's a custody dispute, and the issue is every holiday season, how are we going to divide who has the kids for the Thanksgiving, who's going to get them for Hanukkah, who's going to get them for Christmas. Subscription models for that kind of stuff is, I think, awesome and way underutilized.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're wrapping up. What final thought or tip for lawyers who are, looking to increase fees? What one more tip?
Be confident about how you communicate it. At the end of the day, you can blow the whole thing. You can be thoughtful about what to charge and how to calculate it. And then what happens if someone asks you immediately what you charge and you don't have any context in the case? Do not blurt out the fee. First of all, someone who wants to know what you charge right away is almost surely not a good client. It's a
Yeah.
red flag. If the first thing they want to know is like, what do you charge? Given the kind of problems lawyers solve, go find out context, find out what's at stake for them, get them to explain to you what's at stake. You can work that conversation together. And then if you say, oh, so if you lose this lawsuit, you're going to lose your top client, you're going to lose a competitor, you're going to lose $500,000. Then when you have context, then
Yeah.
quote a fee,
Yeah.
because then the fee in comparison to what's at stake is sensible. If you just go, we have a $15,000 retainer and we charge $6.95 an hour, and you haven't heard context,
Yeah.
the client is gonna the client almost has no choice but to go to the cheapest person they heard.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a great response to that I came up with a while ago? When
Always.
someone asks their fees, you say that's a first of all, always say it's a fantastic question because it
Of course.
is. Okay, that's all right. So that's a fantastic question. Unfortunately, Gideon, it's like asking me how much does a bag of groceries cost, and is it
Yeah.
Cub Foods or Whole Foods, right? So what I'd like to do is spend a little more time really, understanding everything that's going on and the missing pieces. And yeah, I promise you, near the end of our meeting today, we'll talk about rates. Is that okay? Now, if they say sure, you're back on track. If they say no, I still want to know your rates, to your point earlier, this is absolutely a tire kicker. This is someone who's just price shopping.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And then the other thing I've said to people, I ask people, so okay, my understanding is you want this, and that. You have a complicated divorce. Are you looking to do this with the absolute cheapest possible cost?
Yeah.
And if they say yes, I mean, you wouldn't go to a heart surgeon and go, well, honey, the most important thing, we found a great heart surgeon for our
Yeah.
loved one, cheapest surgeon in town.
Yeah.
Insane.
Low end tools.
Low end tools. Exactly. So don't be the low end tool. So don't go with
Yeah.
that. Have confidence in the value you provide as a lawyer. You deserve it.
Yeah. Just awesome. Well, listen, let's wrap up as we love to do on the show with our game changing podcast. This has come up before, but I want to hear your take on it because I'm not really listening to it, but maybe I should. Huberman Lab.
Yeah, Huberman Lab is, I think he's amazing on a couple levels and an inspiration for people like you and me and our listeners. One is first of all, he's grown an audience of 5, 6 million people talking about hardcore science, about really difficult issues, where he goes into depth about nutrition and science and working out and and relationships. And he interviews all these people from Stanford and all these universities around the world. And so he's really shown that you can get people to talk about super complicated, high content, sophisticated stuff, and people are going to listen for 2, 3 hours. And for me, he's an inspiration because that's always the issue. Do we dumb it down? Do we not? And I personally there was a 20-hour, I'm not exaggerating, 20-hour, 6-part interview that he did with Andy Galpin, who's a professor at Cal State Fullerton, who's one of the leading experts about exercise in the world. And they break down weightlifting, every kind of workout. I learned more from that's impacted my life. I found it just unbelievably valuable. And so that's why
Yeah.
I'm kind of a nerd fan of the
Okay.
Huberman Lab podcast, as
Wonderful.
many people are.
Well, I'm gonna have to put that on my watch list, and everybody should too if you're interested in that kind of information, which we all should be. It's like, you're the product, put the oxygen mask on yourself first kind of thing.
100%.
Um, Really fantastic. So let's just take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsors, of course, Law Her podcast. You're going to want to check that out and get lots of great insights on how women are being successful in the law. And of course, Rankings.io, helping their clients with lead generation and following through to actually lock up that business. Gideon, if people want to get in touch with you, they want to, because you do a lot more than just the fee stuff. I mean, you're like a full service consultant and coach for law firms and attorneys. So maybe give just a little bit more about what you do and then how people get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So our company, Rainmaking for Lawyers, full service consulting. We do strategic planning, succession planning, mergers, acquisition, fee setting, compensation for firms all around the country. We're based in California, but we really work in most major cities and lots of states. We work with anybody who's already in that kind of firm or is aspiring to grow a firm that big. We've worked with people who are 2, 3 lawyers who want to become 8 or 20. We love people who are ambitious and entrepreneurial. That is sort of our sweet spot. In terms of getting hold of me, I'm blessed with an unusual and difficult to spell name. So there are a couple easy ways to find me. One, on LinkedIn, Gideon Grunfeld. There's only one.
That's
Pretty
it.
much I'm the only person on the planet with that name, Gideon and Grunfeld. So that's the easiest way. You can also find me just by email, Gideon@rainmakingforlawyers.com. You can find our website, www.rainmakingforlawyers.com. 3 easy ways to find me.
Yeah.
And I
And
would love to, I know your audience is awesome, and I would love to help any of them in any way I can.
awesome. And all that'll be in the show notes as well. And thank you so much, Gideon. I'm not only so thrilled that we met in person in LA, but also that we're able to do this podcast. And I think there's probably a lot more synergies and things that we can do moving forward. I'm very, very pumped and excited about that.
I am too. Hopefully,
Yeah.
this is just the beginning, and I certainly welcome the opportunity to share some value and help your fabulous audience.
Yeah, well, I know you have today. I mean, this is a topic that has not been, beat to death. And I try not to beat to death any topics, but this one in particular, I think really will resonate with people that have been struggling with this question and just getting some insights that it doesn't have to be rocket science to make decisions and to get it across the finish line. So thank you again. And by the way, everybody, thank you for being a great listener. If you know other lawyers that would get value from this podcast, don't be shy. Let them know that we're here and we're available and it's free. So come on, and thanks again for listening today. And we'll continue to help you to be that lawyer, confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. Take care, everybody. Be safe. Be well. Talk again soon.